Hello, today we are going to discuss operator messages, also known as QC messages, that are seen within a batch, and give you a few tips and tools on how to interact with them, some shortcuts, and just some ideas to keep in mind as you review your batches. So here for my demonstration, I'm already viewing the details of a batch. So data management, files submitted, and I double clicked to view the batch that I was interested in. And as I scroll down through the batch, you can see here there's quite a few files, quite a few sites, many days of data. And so submitting this many files in a batch is fine, but it's a little bit difficult to interact with the operator messages from this particular window, especially if you have a batch that has lots and lots of messages that you may need to review and decide which ones you want to delete the no AADT note for, or which ones you'd like to purge, or which ones you just want to leave as the way they are. So another method for looking at them is to use the operator messages tab. So right now we're in the by file tab, and a few over here is the operator messages tab. This will bring up a list of operator or QC messages just for this batch, just for these sites and these days within this batch. And then you can go through them, organizing them by whatever is helpful to you, date or site or message type or something along those lines. Certainly there's certain types of messages that you don't want to do anything with. Complete day continuous failed. So this was only 2 hours of data for the 24th of March. So obviously the 24th is not a day that I'm interested in keeping. The red messages are basically failures of the data, where there was a critical or extreme sort of message attached with this data that makes it have a no AADT note attached to it. That means that the data is in the system, it's kept in the system as having been submitted and can appear on reports, although there will be an asterisk or a note at the bottom of the report indicating that this data has a no AADT note attached to it. But this data will not be used for downstream processing, and that's what the no AADT note indicates. The rest of the messages here, sometimes you'll see them in yellow, depending on what version of Jackalope you're in, or you'll just see them in white, and these are warning messages. So if I were to sort through here, because I prefer to clean up warning messages. I don't even like to see them in yellow. I just want to acknowledge them off. Warning messages don't have to be interacted with at all. They're just for your information. They don't flag the data as bad or interfere with it proceeding in any way in downstream processing. But just for my preference, I like to delete all of the warning messages. If you would like to select deleting an entire large group of messages at one time, you can check mark this top box here, and this will auto check mark everything that is within this particular set of up to 100 messages. Right now we're viewing 1 through 38 of 71 messages. So I'm going to come up here. I have check marked all of these as warning messages that I'd like to delete, and I'm going to say delete note. Jackalopes can ask, did I really want to delete all 38 of these notes? And I'll say yes. It'll take just a moment here. You'll see the spinner going, and then my view will be refreshed without these particular messages anymore, as I've removed the warning that was associated with those. Okay, and then next we have our view refreshed here. Let's imagine that I wanted to come to the 15th. You can see here by the arrow that currently this view is being sorted by the data date, and I can certainly sort by site or flags or description just by clicking on any of these. So right now we'll leave it here. We're viewing messages by date. We've already established we're not interested in the 24th, but the next message we come to is for the 15th. And you can see there's a whole set of these here on the 15th. Two are, looks like a couple of them are for one particular site. So these are spread out just a little bit. So I know you can't see me typing in here, but I'm going to type in site 8006 because I just want to view the messages for site 8006. We'll just work on that at this time. Okay, so here's all the messages associated with just this site sorted by date. So on the 15th, you can see there's a volume message that the direction distribution failed. 86% of the traffic went in one direction and 80% is where my warning is going to flag the data. So because that volume data failed, and this particular QC says if one data type fails, fail all of them, you'll see here that the volume had the error message and that also failed the class that went along with it. So let's imagine that I want to first decide whether the 86% of traffic in one direction is actually acceptable or not. I can check mark this box here and say view data, and that's going to have me viewing April 15th volume data for site 8006. So I'll click view data, and note that the minute I hit view data, I did have a pop-up blocker come on. So the data viewer is going to come up in a separate window. So just keep in mind that you may have a blocker on, or it may resurface if you clear your cache or things like that. So we'll say always allow. Okay, now I'm going to view the data, this time for real. I'll have a data viewer pop up here. And then here's where I can actually view the data. In this case, it's already returning to the way I prefer data to be viewed, which is by date and time. So I could come here and look at where data seems to be heavier on one side of the road or the other. Clearly, the positive direction seems to be significantly higher in volume than the negative direction. And then you can look down to the lane level. Let's just pretend in this case I know that this site has that behavior at certain times or certain days of the year, something along those lines. Okay, I've decided that this is good data. One thing you can do here is you can click on the message up here that was associated with this volume data, and I can say delete note. However, that is going to leave in place the class failure note, the class no AADT note that was associated with this volume. So by deleting the note in this way, and I'll show you, I'm going to click on it here and I'm going to say delete the note. I want to pass this data. I do not want it to have the note AADT note associated with it. I'm going to say yes, confirm. I do want to delete that note. My screen will refresh here. The note is gone. And if I return to my screen here and do a refresh, let's just do that. We'll click refresh. Okay, my view is refreshed here and it's giving me back all of my operator messages. So I would need to sort this again by the way I was doing my review earlier. So we're back to our view here, and the volume data for the 15th that was indicating 80% traffic was in one direction. The volume QC note is now gone. The no AADT note associated with the volume is gone, but the class is still here. So I can check mark here and I can say delete note. But as you can tell, that is at least two different steps required to pass this entire bit of data, both the volume and the class. So one of the quicker methods will be the following. So from here, if we imagine that I know that this site tends to have a distribution that's of a particular type, I do know that this data is good, I've looked through it, and I just want to do as many, as few steps as possible. I can check mark here, select all of these, say delete note in the same way we had done all of those warning messages, and say yes, I do want to delete all of these. My screen will refresh and then I come back to the remaining 24 messages with this associated with this site. If I go back to the file, and let's see, we were looking at site 8006. If we come back to the by file view and find site 8006, we can take a look at it there. So I'll do a Control F 8006, and it will take me to where 8006 is. And you can see here whatever warning or no AADT note messages that had existed for site 8006 are all gone, because here's my 8006. These are all green and all of the data is good at this time. Okay, and one additional option available to you if you have short-term data that you'd like to decide whether QC messages that created a no AADT note should be deleted or in fact are valid, and the data, excuse me, should be allowed to stay with the no AADT note, not be used for downstream processing, is instead of just viewing the data by clicking on one of the buttons here to actually view the data, or going through the operator messages tab and saying view data in that direction, you can click here on the last tab, which is the AADT decision environment. This is only going to work for short-term data, but let's imagine here, let me see if I can find an error. Okay, number of consecutive hours of zero failed. There were 12 hours of consecutive hours of 0, and only 11 are allowed. Previous site AADT, or excuse me, short-term AADT is missing. So I can obviously click on the volume button here and just view the data, but if I'd like to compare this to prior years, because I'm really not sure if this is appropriate or not in this case, perhaps there really aren't any vehicles for until later in the morning. One other option for you is to click on the AADT decision environment. We'll look for site 1083. This will bring up a pop-up again, so allow pop-ups if they don't come up automatically. And we're looking for site 1083. I'll click on the site here. These are all of the sites that were contained within that single batch. So if you just have 3 sites in a batch and click on the AADT decision environment, you'll just get 3 sites. But here's site 1083. Here, down here are the count AADTs. And here is the count that we're looking at. There is a QC message associated with it. It's red. We can come over here and see what the message was, which was that consecutive hours of 0 failed here. And if I look back at past years, I can see what the other count AADTs were for historical data. Sometimes there are site AADTs that will be helpful, which are calculated after or during phase 4. So in this case, you can see that there were only some growthed AADTs for years past. So in this case, the count AADTs will be the way we want to review this data. And perhaps it looks like the year 2000 had an unusually high volume. Let's just say that we decided 2014 was pretty good. Maybe we've had an increase in the last number of years and we decide that the AADT of 60 would be okay. You can come over in this case to this here, the message here, click once with your left mouse and say delete note, and you can delete the note from that way as well, rather than having to do it from this screen in here. Okay, I'm refreshing my screen and we'll find site 1083 here in a moment. 1083. And you can see now the only message that was left was that there wasn't a previous AADT to compare to, because that's one of the QC settings that I have turned on, saying I would like to know if there's a previous, if there is not a previous AADT to compare to. Okay, and now just a few more tips and thoughts here. Back into our operator messages tab. For this demonstration, we're currently just looking at site 2543, and you can see there are quite a few days in a row here with the volume data that failed because the AADT this year is too much different from the prior AADT that it's comparing to. So one thing to keep in mind is that in addition to deleting the note, you can create new notes and you can edit current notes. So let's just start with this. We'll look at August 2nd, I check marked here and I'm going to say view data. Here's my message up here. If, let's just say, I evaluated this and I made a decision that in fact it is bad data because I know something that the average person doesn't know, I can left click on this here to select it. I can say edit note, and I could add a little bit of information in here. Maybe I could replace this with some more helpful information and things like that. You can also delete the note here. One thing you cannot do is change a no AADT note into a purge note. If you would like to actually purge this data, completely remove it from the system, from this window you could hit new note, and then as soon as your screen comes all the way up, you could do a purge here. We could say all data types we want to purge for this day. We're looking at this site and this day. It's specific to those things, and say save changes. Are we sure? Yes. And then in a moment when the screen reloads itself, you'll see you are viewing purge data. And in order to unpurge it, you'd need to delete the purge note from this section. So we'll say okay. And you can see here I've added a purge note. So this data is in fact purged. We'll come back to our original screen here. 2543. So let's go back to the by file and I'll show you what that looks like. See if I typed that in right. 2543. So my screen's still refreshing here. So here is the 2nd of August that we were looking at, and as you may know by now, the black button means that this data has been purged. So those are a few things to keep in mind with operator messages, and I hope this is helpful. Thank you.